Marisha here, and today I'm going to share with you 5 historic pubs to visit in London. Now, this is not a definitive list. There are plenty of old pubs to see in London, but these are the 5 that I find the most interesting, starting with Ye Olde Cheshire Cheese in Holborn on Fleet Street. This dates back to 1667, and it's actually the youngest pub on my list, so for my American audience, all of these pubs are older than the US. Now, Ye Olde Cheshire Cheese is a great stop for people who are out and about exploring central London, especially kind of over by Fleet Street, St. Paul's Cathedral, that kind of area, to stop and have some lunch, have a break, and then move on to the rest of their day. But what makes Ye Olde Cheshire Cheese interesting to me is the literary connection. So, this was a place that was frequented by Charles Dickens, and there are a lot of pubs that claim Charles Dickens hung out there, and I'm sure he did. I think the man got around in London. However, this one is mentioned in one of his works. I think it's Hard Times, but don't quote me on that. And then there's also a plaque inside that shows where he sat when he was there as a regular. But in addition to Dickens, there were a lot of other writers that used to hang out there, including Mark Twain, George Orwell, Sir Arthur Conan Doyle, and I think G.K. Chesterton. Of the 5 pubs, it's also the one that has the best food, I think. Now, I will say that this list of pubs is not being recommended on the basis of food. And for most of them, the food is going to be pretty mid. Um, but it's certainly serviceable. It's good enough food. This is not a list for foodies. This is a list for history buffs. So the second pub on the list is Spaniards Inn. This is farther out. This is in Hampstead. This was built in 1585, and it's a good place to go if you're planning a day on Hampstead Heath and going to Kenwood House. It's in walking distance from Kenwood House. Its historical significance, there is a literary connection as well. It's in Dracula. It's mentioned in Dracula. It's part of kind of the plot in Dracula. But also historically, it was a hideout for Dick Turpin. And for my American audience who might not be familiar with that name, he was kind of a legendary outlaw here in England. Third on the list is the Mayflower, and I recognize this is probably going to be more appealing to my American audience than my British audience. And you might be able to guess from the name, the Mayflower. This is the site of where the Mayflower docked before it left for Amsterdam and then, finally the New World. This dates back to 1550. It's out in Rotherhithe. I hope I'm pronouncing that correctly. So it is kind of out there, and it's in an area where there's not a lot else to see. So this is one on the list where you would want to specifically say, like, I actually really want to go see the Mayflower. I'm really interested in kind of that period of history, or the Pilgrims. It does do a really good job of kind of playing up that history. There is a pamphlet that you can grab for free there that talks you through kind of the history of the pub and its ties to the Mayflower. There's also a statue of the Pilgrims kind of next door at a local park along the Thames. But again, it's the one on my list that I think is kind of more niche in terms of its historic appeal. Fourth on the list is Ye Olde Mitre, and this is also centrally located in Holborn, but it can be tricky to find. It's kind of tucked away in a back alleyway. It's very small, so small they don't actually serve entrees. The only food they serve are like snacks. So the most kind of like substantial food that I could get there was a Scotch egg. For me, that's enough for lunch, but generally speaking, don't plan on going there for a meal. Just go for a drink or even just pop in, take some pictures, pop out, go about your day. Ye Olde Mitre dates back to 1546, and its selling point is in the corner they have like this trunk of a cherry tree that supposedly Queen Elizabeth I danced under. And then finally on the list, the oldest pub in London. And this There are pubs that kind of argue about which is the oldest. And this claims to be the oldest. It also claims to be the oldest riverside pub in the country. It dates back to 1520. It's called the Prospect of Whitby, and it is out in Wapping. This would be a place to go if you are visiting the Tower of London. You can walk there from the Tower of London in 20 or 30 minutes. And along the way, you can stop at St. Catherine's Docks and just kind of walk along the River Thames. So it's a nice walk. Um, Prospect of Whitby does a really good job again of creating kind of that atmosphere. You feel like you're back in history. It has plenty of signage talking about the history of the pub, how it was originally called the Pelican, and then for a while its name changed to like the Devil's Tavern because it was associated with pirates and other scoundrels before finally it became the Prospect. It was a place where Captain Kidd hung out. It's also near the executioner's dock where lots of people were executed, including Captain Kidd. And as a nod to that, they have a noose that kind of hangs from out back by the Thames. Um, Also, you won't find this information on like the Wikipedia page entry about it, but while I was there, I learned it was also where the fuchsia plant was introduced to England. Of all of the pubs, I think it was my favorite in terms of the atmosphere and the environment, and also the um like customer service. The people there were really nice, but it was the worst in terms of quality of food. So I had the fish and chips and they were not great. I mean it was perfectly edible. Everything on this list, the food is perfectly fine. But like I said, it's mid, right? You're not going here for the food. You're going here for the historic significance and acknowledging that the food is good enough to like give you sustenance to get you through the rest of the day. Um, Also, by the Prospect of Whitby, there are stairs that you can take down to the Thames, and you can kind of comb the beach, for lack of a better word, there and maybe find some cool stuff. I found and these are pretty common to find along the Thames. They're clay pipes. The stems of the pipes, the bowls have since been lost to time, but you can see the holes, right? So these would be from, back in the time when people smoked clay pipes. So I found several of those. I found some shards of ceramics from like China that had washed ashore. So, if that's interesting to you, that's something that's easy to do at the Prospect of Whitby. But those are five of the most interesting pubs, I think, of historical significance in London. And I didn't include this as my free London series, but technically, you can go to these pubs and just wander around and take pictures and leave without spending money. Um, I would recommend not doing that. I would recommend actually, having a pint or having something to eat so that you can really be part of the atmosphere. But technically, yeah, you could incorporate this as part of, free London. Like, subscribe, tell your friends how gnarly this channel is, and I'll see you next time.